eternal righteous. That's a damnable heresy. That'll steal your joy. Amen? And I know because it sounds so right. Now, I've done some studying in the Tanakh, and I'm here to tell you that heaven, or the believer living eternally with Yahweh in heaven, is not a pagan doctrine. Okay? Let's get that straight. Let's get that out of the way right away. It is not a pagan doctrine. But on the other hand, I couldn't find a single verse in the Torah that specifically and clearly said that when a patriarch died or a Kedosh Tzaddik died in the Tanakh, that they went to heaven. I couldn't find a verse. The only verses that I can find about the Tzaddikim in the Tanakh going to heaven were Enoch and Eliyahu. And of course, there are answers to that. There are some who say that Eliyahu was transferred from one mountain to another place on the earth. Same with Enoch. And so they try to wiggle their way around that as well. But I've got to be honest with you. In doing my understanding, my preparation, I couldn't find one specific verse that specifically said that anyone who lived before Golgotha, before Yeshua's sacrifice, before Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection, before the coming of the Kipporah of the Moshiach, I could not find a single verse that told me that the believer went to heaven. I got to admit that. See, and the devil plays on that. Little do they realize that that's part of the program. Now, the Hebrew word for heaven is the Hebrew word shamayim. Shamayim. Or heavens. Shamayim. The Greek word is uranos. O-U-R-A-N-O-S. Uranos, which literally means the heavens. Uranos. Okay? So the Greek word uranos is the corresponding Greek word to the Hebrew shamayim. This doctrine that teaches that believers do not live in heaven, they live in the earth, waiting for the resurrection, I agree with, to some extent. See, there's so much truth in this deal that you'll slide right off the mountain if you can't rightfully divide the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, study to show yourself approved, a workman who need not be ashamed, rightfully dividing the word of truth. Is it true that a believer goes into the ground and waits for the resurrection? It's true. Is it true that there's no verse in the Tanakh that says specifically a believer entered heaven and entered their heavenly abode? It's true. There is so much here that it appears that the doctrine of the believer living forever in heaven is not scriptural and is not right. Is any of this making sense? Yes. And personally, I mean, to be honest with you, if I'm not going to be with Yeshua in heaven, if I'm not going to be where He is, if I'm not going to live with Him forever, I may rethink my position here. I may rethink what I'm doing on this earth, in the days of this earth, in my earthly sojourn, in my earthly pilgrimage, coming every Shabbat, being faithful, doing things that no one else would, in their right mind would do, because we're not supposed to be in our right mind. We're supposed to be into the mind of Yeshua. I'm doing things, I'm sacrificing things, I'm giving things. I ought to be taking more things. I ought to be living in the world, eating, drinking, and being merry, because tomorrow we die and go to sleep and wait for the Master to come. So I'm confused, see? And what the enemy does, what the devil does, he plays on this confusion. Amen? Turn to your neighbor and say, he plays on the confusion. There's enough truth to the believers don't go to heaven doctrine, or that believing that the believer goes to heaven is a pagan doctrine. There's enough truth there to trip up any well-meaning, sincere believer. See, and that's one good thing about being in the church, in the so-called church. They don't have a problem with this. Because in their theology, all believers go to heaven. Hello? Yeah. In their theology, all believers go to heaven. It's us, Messianics, who love the full counsel of Yahweh, who love the full word of Yahweh, who love both covenants, the first and the second. It is we who struggle with this because we're looking for believer goes to heaven scriptures in the first covenant and we don't find it. And then there are other scriptures in the second covenant that also seem to make it appear that the believer dies, and from the point of death to the Moshiach's return, there is no life in heaven. There's enough there. There's enough there so that we buy it, so it can confuse us. Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
Baruch Hashem Yahweh.
So we've got to nail this thing down. Now there's truth and there's error. And what do we have to do to be students of Yahweh? Separate, rightfully divide, rightfully separate the truth from the error. And we're going to see both the truth and the error. Bereshis 28:17. Yaakov wrestling with Yahweh on Yaakov's ladder. The ladder went up to heaven. And Yaakov said, verse 17, how awesome is this place. This is none other than the house of Elohim. This is the gate of heaven. This afternoon's message, restoring the gates of heaven. Restoring the gates of heaven. Yaakov said that the top of Yaakov's ladder, Sulam, where we get the Hebrew word peace, Shalom, Sulam, the top of Yaakov's ladder, or the Shalom between man and Yahweh, Yahushua stood at the top, and at the very top of the ladder is heaven's gates. But it didn't say Yaakov went in, did it? It didn't say Yaakov went into the gate. It just says, he said, this is the gate. He stood at the gate. He saw the gate. He observed the gate. But he didn't, it doesn't say he went in or that he what? Entered the gate. Amen, somebody. Amen. Now, let's go to Yochanan in the Brit Hadashah. Yochanan, chapter 3. And here is where the no heaven doctrine gets more ammunition. Here's where they get more ammunition. Verse 13. No one has gone up into heaven. This is who's talking now. Yahushua HaMoshiach is talking. No one has gone up into heaven except he who came down from heaven, even the son of Adam, who has to be lifted up. There it is. So it appears, what is Yeshua saying? It appears he's saying, no one has ever gone to heaven. Isn't that what it looks like it's saying? Isn't that what it appears to be saying? See, and there's enough words and phrases and scriptures in this theology to get you all confused. And those of you who like to surf on the internet, you got to be careful, because you and I are very susceptible to coming across some well-meaning, well-sounding, well-rounded website and get blown away. Because to be honest with you, if I don't have hope that after all that I've done and served, all you've done and served the Master, Yahushua, to inherit his home, his reward, and be with him, then it is making the life of a believer much tougher. Yes. And what we do is, we don't have the joy that is our strength. When we don't have the joy that is our strength, that means we don't have strength to walk and endure to the end, because he that endures to the end, he and she is the one that shall be delivered. How are you going to be delivered from this age? By walking and enduring to the end. How are you going to endure to the end? By believing that at the end of this journey, wherever Yeshua is, you shall be also. Amen. Yeshua said, where I am, you shall be also. That's right. Amen. So once you figure out where Yeshua is, that's where you'll be. But this is invading the camp. This is infiltrating the movement. This is coming in our midst as cyanide, as a little leaven leveling the whole up. Now, I don't want to get into the doctrine of soul sleep. That's not my issue here. All right? Even if you want to argue soul sleep, that's not the... You can even believe in soul sleep and not disregard the doctrine of heaven as pagan. Okay? But I'm going to prove to you today why they catch us, why they ensnare us, why they entrap us. And some of you have got to unlearn there is no heaven doctrine, because if you don't, that may be why you're struggling as a believer. That may be why you're having a hard time as a believer. Because Satan has sapped you. Satan has sapped